I actually got introduced to product management at Jio. People were asking me, why are you leaving a Jio, which is such a large company, and joining a very early stage startup? Because startups were not mainstream back then.
What differentiates Razorpay from its competitors in the fintech space?
When you're trying to transact, your amount gets debited, but the transaction still shows as pending, and then you are a bit anxious.
It happens. How do you explain how the UPI ecosystem works?
As a PM, your job is to say, how do I build a compelling value proposition to whichever customer, but in a way in which the business becomes viable. One thing I've learned is never hesitate to learn something new, embrace ambiguity as much as possible.
What should an early career PM do to have a career trajectory like you have had?
When I hire it for my teams, I generally look for people who demonstrated extremely strong.
So, Vijeth, my first question to you would be, Razorpay is considered widely as a pioneer in India when it comes to seamless payments for Indian businesses. What differentiates Razorpay from its competitors in the fintech space, which has led to it becoming the most dominant, B2B payments player in the country?
Yeah. I think at the core of it, right, what I fundamentally believe is Razorpay truly operates the business as a B2B2C. And what I mean by that is that, if you were building products for businesses, if you were to only go by the requirement of what that business wants, let's say if you were talking to a product manager in a particular, customer of ours or a finance person, etc., the requirements they would have versus if you independently start thinking of, hey, who are the customers of our customers? What do they want? Mm-hmm. How are they likely to, want to transact on this merchant? What are the channels they would want to operate on? What's the lowest cost to serve that customer for our customer, so to say, right? So when you start thinking of all of these avenues, I think Razorpay has done a great job of saying that, hey, we really truly understand our customers and all their requirements. Right, so if you think about payments, Razorpay is into multiple other businesses as well. But given payments is like the fundamental core of the company of sorts, the three key requirements of any merchant is, how can I deliver very high success rates, and why high success rates? Because that then gives that confidence to their end user that every time I want to transact, I'm not likely to see like a pesky payment failure,
yes,
or a point where I'm sure you would have seen. I don't know if you face this or not. Like when you're trying to transact, your amount gets debited, but the transaction still shows as pending, and then you are a bit anxious.
It happens, right? It happens quite a lot.
I think Razorpay is one of those rare companies I've seen saying that, how do you take this problem statement? Like if you were to stick on this problem statement, saying, I know that merchants, customers of our merchants get very anxious when an issue like this happens. How do I go about solving that problem? And, how does it impact our merchant? One is, customers lose trust. They get very anxious. They call up the customer support center of the merchant. Mm-hmm. It increases the customer support budget that they'll have to manage, because more calls will have to have more, people managing and addressing concerns. Yeah. It increases the customer support cost. It also has an impact on the lifetime value of what that customer could transact on that merchant. Because every time an issue like this happens, the customers also get conservative on transacting on that merchant again. Because there are multiple options, especially in India, in every category there are other options.
Yes.
So when you think from a holistic point of view, you then connect to saying that, okay, if I have to solve this problem, what all would I have to do? A company like Razorpay, I think what they've done phenomenally well is that they've realized that, look, our success or failure in delivering whatever product or solution to our merchants depends on the kind of experience the end user has on that merchant, depends on the availability or accessibility of that services through multiple channels, and also depends on the kind of payment processing orchestration that sits with banks. Because all of these need to come together to really, really solve that particular problem, right? So if you think about it, Razorpay has launched multiple, products. Like let's say we have our own checkout, which completely, has our own UI, UX, where we know that, hey, this is what the end user wants to do. We allow for a certain level of customization for our merchants, etc. we've allowed our merchants to reach their end users through different channels. It could be obviously on their app and desktop, but it's also, let's say, if someone wants to just get a payment link, can the merchant just generate a payment link and send it to a customer and they can pay whatever their browser is? Do they want to transact on a WhatsApp? Right, where you just send out payment reminders or premium permanent collections for, let's say, like an insurance company, etc. So we figured out what are those channels through which merchants would like to reach end users and how do they want to transact. And at the same time, we've invested a lot in improving the infrastructure that sits with banks. Now, whether it is for something like UPI or cards or even some of the recurring, etc. To say that, okay, if we do this, will it fundamentally then solve that end user problem and therefore the merchant's problem, right? So when you connect multiple dots together and you really look at that problem first principles and then you solve for it, the merchants also then get a lot of confidence over you because they know that, hey, we are like a co-partner to the merchant in solving some of these problems that they are facing in their day-to-day life. And I think Razorpay is one company which has really thought through this end-to-end. I mean, no company is perfect, but I think Razorpay has done this a job much better than most of the competitors, I would.
Well, this is very interesting, actually. So you are saying their success with merchants is mostly because the merchants think Razorpay is their trusted partner to solve their user problems.
Yes.
How do you explain how the UPI ecosystem works?
Okay, so if I were to explain UPI in very simple terms, let's actually talk it through a transaction. That will probably make it very easy for everyone to understand, right? Let's say Navneet is a user. He has a bank account in ICICI, I'm just using a particular bank name here. And you were transacting on Swiggy. Let's say you were ordering, let's say New Year's Eve, you're ordering food for the team. Right? So Swiggy is the business. Navneet is the customer. Navneet's bank is ICICI. Now you're paying online because you're making, you've ordered something, you're making the payment, etc. Now, how does the money movement happen from your bank to, let's say, Swiggy's bank account? Swiggy also would have a bank account, just like how an individual has a bank account. Swiggy will also have what they call as a business account, right? A corporate account of sorts with a particular bank. Now, in this example, let's call it HDFC, for example.
Okay.
Right? Now, what happens is, before this transaction would have started, Swiggy has payment aggregators who are powering some of these payments at the back end for them. Right? Let's say Swiggy is integrated with a Razorpay.
What is a payment aggregator? If you can explain that also.
So, a payment aggregator is essentially someone who, I'd have to, take a step back for you to explain how did a payment aggregator come that will help you understand what is a payment aggregator. What used to happen earlier was that if let's say if 30, 40 years back, if you were gone to any government entity to pay a particular bill, you would have a particular counter there. Where if you go and want to pay, let's say, a municipal corporation bill, let's say your current bill or your water bill or any other utility bill, each of them will probably have a bank partner of theirs. So let's say, I remember that if you paid money for your property tax in Bangalore, BBMP, which is the governing body here, had Axis Bank as their partner. What that meant was annually when you were paying your property tax, you would have to go to an Axis Bank counter, get a voucher there, make the payment there and bring that as a receipt to BBMP to say, look, I have made a payment in the counter that you wanted me to pay.
Yes.
This is the physical manifestation of how the payment happened. How does the online manifestation of this happen is that, let's say instead of BBMP, it's a Swiggy, which is the merchant or the business collecting the payment here. They would probably, instead of having only one, because what happens in the case of online is the customer is transacting and each success or failure is worth a lot of millions of dollars in the back end, right? Because a lot of these merchants have spent a lot of money in acquiring these customers.
Yes.
And payments is that part of the funnel which is the most sensitive. Because here, these are really high intent customers who've done all the navigations through the app or through the website, wherever they're ordering, and they finally reach the stage where they're making your payment. That can't go wrong because that's very expensive then for the merchant, right? So what they said is, look, I don't want to deal with just one bank. Can I deal with 2 or 3 or 4 banks? Whichever can give me the best possible options, right? Eventually, the need of the merchant also increased. They said that, hey, how can I, let's say I want UPI, I want cards, I want people to make payments through autopay because subscriptions started coming up. They want to make money through cards recurring, where you want to pay a particular subscription fee using your credit card every single time. There was net banking that has come up. So they said that can one bank offer all of this width of coverage of features? The answer was no. Can one bank be up all the time so that the success rate doesn't get impacted? The answer was no. Can a single bank ensure that I have to pay the lowest cost to serve my end user? What I mean by that is, every time there's a transaction failure, the customer is calling me. I have to address that call. There's a certain customer support call like we discussed earlier, right? So there is a penalty or a cost that I keep incurring if I deal with only one, because all these issues then come about. How about if I have a choice? It could also happen that, from an ease of doing business, if the bank knows that you are the only player, so will they really support you in everything that they want? And that's not just true for a bank, it's generally true for any business to business partnership as well, right? What happens in this case is that merchants generally wanted choice. They didn't want single point of failures. Even if the bank was doing a really good job, they felt that, hey, tomorrow, what if it does not? And us not having another option as businesses become big, you see that even if the bank is doing a great job, they say that, hey, I want to have redundancy. I can't depend on single, player of sorts, right? So because of this, what started happening, these merchants started wanting to integrate with multiple banks. No, that's not always feasible because, for banks, payments is mostly, small part of their business because banks have multiple other aspects to look at, right? They also would not naturally think of integration first, etc., because the tech vendors who are there at the bank are not really customer savvy, etc., right? So if the officials in banks really want to do a good job, some of the tech vendors were not able to keep up with those demands. So because all this happened, they said that, hey, can there, there was this new, concept came saying payment aggregator.
Okay.
Saying can there be an aggregator in the market which can aggregate all the products of all the banks and then distribute it to different merchants? By creating where the merchant does not have to talk to any of these banks at all. They just have to talk to the payment aggregator, and the payment aggregator will then figure out saying, okay, if a particular bank is down, I will route you to another bank. I will do the KYC for you, and I will do it in a friendlier way, because it's also the grammar and the tone and language which people talk, right? They felt that the payment aggregators were more new age. They were able to understand the language of the new kind of consumer tech companies, etc., or any other company for that matter. So all of the ease of doing business improved quite a bit. So right from the KYC and onboarding till the settlement of the money, they really understood the requirements, which is where the payment aggregator came in, saying that, we have different banks. We will distribute all the products that these banks have in a very friendly, ease of doing business method in mind to some of these merchants. And that's how a payment aggregator came. And that is now, become predominant. RBI also has given a PAPG license now because they realize that, these, especially these PAPG fintechs are doing a phenomenal job in, ensuring more merchants are getting digitized, things are happening in a more seamless, easy way, etc. Right? So all of this was the pretext to the question that you asked, right?
Yeah.
Saying what do payment aggregators do of sorts? So now let's go back to the question answer on which we were discussing around the Swiggy, the example that you asked. Navneet customer has an ICICI bank account, is transacting on a Swiggy which has a current account, let's say in HDFC. This is this one. And let's say Swiggy is being powered by Razorpay, which is the payment aggregator here. Now what happens is that when Swiggy would have done the deal with Razorpay, it would be like, hey, my success rate should be high. I should get the best possible coverage of features. I should have the lowest cost to serve my end user. So give me as many terminals. Now Razorpay would have ensured, okay, I'll give you different terminals. Now what is a terminal? It's a virtual manifestation of that physical counter that we spoke about.
Yes.
Right? Where I say that, okay, I will give you a collection counter from Axis, from HDFC, from ICICI, from Yes Bank. I mean, some of these top banks, right? And I will collect money depending on that transaction, but that particular transaction, whichever is the best counter which has the fastest processing, I will give it to you there so that this payment goes through.
Okay.
So let's say in this example, the way UPI operates is that when you as a customer are trying to make a payment, there is something called as it's UPI is a 4 stakeholder model. Okay, what are those 4 stakeholders? There is NPCI that sits in between, which is like the core, the heart, or the brain rather of this entire movement. It has 4 parties talking to it. One is what is called as the payee or the merchant side, right? The other side is called as the payer, which is the end user side, Navneet in this case. Then there is a issuing bank or a remitter bank, basically the account from which the money gets debited. In this case, ICICI Bank is the remitter that sits on top. And then there is something called as a beneficiary bank, which is, let's say the terminal that Razorpay gave to a Swiggy could be, let's say, HDFC. HDFC becomes the beneficiary bank. So when you make a payment on Swiggy, the money needs to go from ICICI to HDFC. And all these 4 players talk to NPCI in what we call as asynchronous transactions. So when you try to make a payment, basically, if I were to explain in simple English, Razorpay takes the instruction from Swiggy and says that, hey, there is a payment being attempted of, let's say, 600 rupees to be made by Navneet to Swiggy. And all these 4 stakeholders that I said speak to each other in a asynchronous way with NPCI. NPCI acts like the central brain, where it knows exactly what's happening with the transaction, what stage it is at, is it succeeding or is it failing, and all of this information happens. The way it's also built out is that it's a plug and play on both sides. So anyone can actually operate it on the merchant side as well. Any consumer app can also come and sit on the stack on the payer side. So these are all interoperable transactions. So if you see today, if you're using a PhonePe app, or if you're using the latest fad, which is Super Money, you can just open your app and you can start transacting and make payment in exactly the same way which you would have done through a PhonePe. So they've built a truly interoperable stack with these 4 pieces with NPCI in between.
Okay, what's the full form of NPCI for the audience?
It's National Payments Corporation of India. It's a body. It's actually a public body, but it also has a lot of banks, which acts as the governing body for it. Obviously, with RBI being the key part of it.
Many PMs who are early in their career, they think about building a successful career in product management, but many of them do not know what does it look like. So my question to you would be, what should an early career PM do to have a career trajectory like you have had? I think you have gone from a PM at Jio to Senior Director of Product at Razorpay in a little less than a decade, which is an incredible journey, and good inspiration for PMs in the ecosystem. How should they look? How should they go about it? How should they think about it?
Yeah, look, I think there have been. Everyone has their own journey, right? But if I were to just take out things from mine, if it could be useful for someone, I think earlier on I just focused a lot on the complexity and ambiguity of the problem statement I was working with, rather than any brand or this one. If you think about it, I started my experience with Jio. Jio was obviously the world's largest telecom operator, and even now, I just went with the ambition. I got it. I actually got introduced to product management at Jio. No one would have guessed. I got my patents from Jio, not any other company, right? So the first thing I left was like, don't have any biases, prejudgment saying that, will I be able to do product here or not? You don't know. You only know once you get in. Second, be very open to learning, very fast learning, and take up extremely complex and ambiguous problem statement because it teaches you a lot. I almost was like an entrepreneur at Jio. I built out a bottom-up product, which is not natural in a company like Jio. But thanks to them, they opened it up for me. I built a offline kind of an app store, built a data transfer product, something equivalent to a ShareIt. And there, what I learned is, what is the business model? And I'm talking about early PM days, right?
Yeah.
You need to know what is the business model. Otherwise, just saying, customer obsession is very easy. But not knowing how it works within the constraints of having a viable business is where the magic happens. I learned a lot of these basics then. And it probably could have waited out 5-6 years into my product experience to learn all that. But I think I challenged myself to say that, hey, I want to really learn and get up to speed, start engaging with stakeholders, even at a senior level. And one thing I learned is that as you are in very difficult businesses, you also end up dealing with difficult stakeholders. And the amount of learning you get out of that, I can't quantify that benefit, right? So earlier on, I really consciously worked on some of these very hard problem statements, very, something which you need to just put your head down and understand it. So that's something I did. Second, I figured out is that just work a lot with first principles and don't be afraid to try new things. If you think from experience, earlier on days, I tried different domains. I went from a geo, which was completely telecom and digital at that point in time, to a Practo, which was a health tech company. And I'm talking about this again 9 years back, right? Where the startups were just getting up. People were asking me, why are you leaving a geo, which is such a large company, and joining a very early stage startup? Because startups were not mainstream back then, right? Compared to now. Now startups are way more mainstream. So that didn't, be like bold enough to take some of these calls. Because early in your career, you really don't have a lot to be afraid about. So therefore take more. And I said that, look, I went with the problem statement saying, look, health tech is extremely hard. I want to understand this. Break it up into pieces, understand the building blocks. And I just, take up a very nice, very tough challenge. It teaches you stuff, right? So try different domains, be open to learning, take up tough challenges. And then I went into Amazon, which is completely e-commerce. And towards the end, when I was in the second stint at Amazon, I took up Alexa because I wanted to understand voice technology. I want to understand what is AI, what is ML, what is this, automated speech recognition, what is this NLU, which is natural language, etc. And just because, it teaches you so many different things. For me, when I'd done 4 years of e-commerce at Amazon, then to go to a voice tech while it was still within Amazon, very completely different businesses at the end of the day, right? I mean, there's, sun and moon between the two. But then you're like, no, you want to learn it. And then it came to a FinTech, right? So one thing I've learned is like, never hesitate to learn something new, embrace ambiguity as much as possible. And then you really learn these core aspects, which helps you move. You become the core linchpin in any company that you end up going into because you're not afraid to fail. See, the moment you go into new domains, you know that, hey, whatever last 3 years that I've learned probably will be a zero. I'm starting here. But as long as you focus on some of the basics like first principles, thinking, etc., you end up learning. As a PM, your job is to say, how do I build a compelling value proposition to whichever customer? It could be a B2C customer, B2B, B2B2C, etc. But in a way in which the business becomes viable. Unless you have both, you're not a PM. You can be a product designer also. You can be anything else, but you're not a PM. Because if you're not able to bridge both these worlds, one is a very hard world of constraints. The other is a hard world of aspiration. But not able to combine the two, you're not really a PM. So I think thanks to a lot of my mentors that I had right from the time of Geo and from now, got this learning very early that you have to marry these two but to be a successful PM. So when you go and talk to a business stakeholder, let's say in an Amazon or a Razorpay or before, when you talk to them, they understand that, hey, he's not saying you need to just give this customer value proposition. He has also thought through these constraints that are there for the business. Therefore, then they take your words more seriously. That somebody who actually understands the business 360 degree and is giving a proper solution which is really thought through versus giving one-sided where, hey, no, this will be a loss making. If you go give a product idea and it's loss making, they will be like, this guy is not serious. He's asking me to bleed, but something, this one, they're not even thinking through, they're just coming with it. So try and build a very holistic, understanding of your business, whichever business or domain you're part of. You will build much better quality products.
So the understanding of business is very, very critical.
Very critical. Extremely.
Also because it helps anyone come up with ideas, which not only create more value for customers, but capture a part of that value as a business.
Absolutely.
And that is also how you prove your mettle and how you can actually take the business forward, not just the user experience forward. Just a way I look at it.
One other point I would add is and this is something I learned, this is valid for early PMs and even for mid-stage PMs, right, is really understand the motivations of your stakeholders. It's extremely important because as PMs, you're leading by influence, except maybe once you reach a product leader level where you have people reporting to you. It's usually a slightly bit of a lonely job where you're leading both by influence, right? Where you're essentially telling the org where to prioritize time and resources in some way.
Yeah.
And it's a very high accountability role, therefore. But for you to do it and be successful in championing whatever idea, this one that you have with stakeholders, you really need to know what matters to them as well. We go by saying, okay, there's customer, there's business, but there's also stakeholders. What matters to them? How do you ensure wins? How do you ensure wins that can be attributed to them also, so that they also end up championing you more in some fashion? It's very important to understand each one's motivation, so that you know then how to effectively work with them. If you don't do the third one and you do the first two well, which is understanding your customer well, understanding your business well, but not understanding your stakeholder well, I've seen in my experience, I've worked in different domains and different cultures also. If you see from a Geo to a Practor to an Amazon to a Razorpay, very different culture.
Yeah.
The one thing which I've seen is similar is understanding stakeholders really well. And people who don't do that well, I can bet that 90% chance that they'll fail, even if they do the first two really well. Because unless the third one, if you don't bring along everyone, it's truly sabka saath, sabka vikas in this case. Because if you don't bring everyone, you cannot deliver the first two as well. You have to bring everyone together.
What do you look for when you hire for your teams?
Yeah.
Whether it is Razorpay or before, anything specific you can talk about will be very helpful for the audience.
Yeah. Look, when when I hire it for my teams, I generally look for people who demonstrated extremely strong ownership before. Because ownership is a trait where somebody is willing to say, I will do what it takes to learn about the customer, about the business, about the stakeholder, and really do what it takes to then make it either a success or at least give it all before concluding that it's a failure. It's an important proxy signal for that. So therefore, look for very good examples of where they've demonstrated ownership traits. Look for people who have extremely strong empathy. Empathy again will have this thing that, okay, are they able to empathize with the customer? Are they able to understand? Often one times what happens is I ask this question to some of my PMs saying that, okay, tell me the last time when you presented a case for investment for a particular product or feature you got and you got rejected. How did you deal with it? And that will tell me a lot about that person. Because, there are a lot of mature folks who say that, hey, they rejected it, but, I can understand why they did it because they didn't see something or this. Versus some people saying, no, they were not able to really understand the idea. You can understand that they're really not able to understand and empathize with the constraints of what it takes to run a business.
Yeah.
It's very important. It tells the maturity of the person. And similarly, that extends to stakeholders then, right? I look for people who've been very proactive by nature. Product management is a lot about proactive thinking. It's a lot about thinking around the corner, saying who can come, what can fail. A lot of people who have done pre-mortem thinking rather than post-mortem, where they're saying that, hey, are you able to visualize everything that could go well or bad, and then accordingly kind of work it out? You need to anticipate saying, if I do this, these two things will happen, which is great, but these three things could happen, which could be a failure. How do I anticipate? So proactive tells me that will they be able to anticipate things better? Will they be communicating proactively as well? That's also important. So proactive as a nature is also something that I look for in people, saying that are they able to do it? And then the last one I look at it is, are they someone who come with a strong backbone and an opinion, where just because I am saying something to them, do they just buckle down, or do they have a strong opinion? But at the same time, are they flexible enough to change their mind when you confront them with new facts or data or anecdotes? Because both of this is equally important. Because let's say if I am the product leader and I'm telling them that, hey, this needs to be done. And if they're not able to convey what their opinion is, I have a problem. Because look, product leaders generally, they end up being assertive. And there are a lot of PMs who are able to kind of stand up for their opinion. It's not about standing up to the person, it's about standing up to their opinion. If they think the opinion of the person is correct, fair, go along with it. But if they think that, hey, I am closer to the problem, not the product leader. So I have actually seen 2-3 other aspects which he may not be aware of.
Yes.
So, you operate at a certain slightly more distance. So I want to bring those inputs to that person and then fashion that opinion. I value that more. And so therefore I see whether they have an opinion of theirs or not. It's very important. If they don't have any opinion, red flag. But at the same time, if they have an opinion where they're like, no matter what, this is the only opinion that matters, that means they're not flexible enough to change when needed. So these are broadly the 4 things. But if I were to rate one, I would say ownership is the number one thing that I look for, because that's an attitudinal check eventually.
Yeah.
And attitude is important. Everything else we can teach folks.
Yeah, other skills they can learn on the job, but if they haven't demonstrated a knack for ownership in previous projects or previous work, because some people do come into product from non-product background, non-product teams. Even there, if they have shown any kind of ownership, it's a signal.
Absolutely. One thing which I miss telling, is actually folks who have the ability to learn very fast, who are very curious, who just want to learn about, they want to listen, they want to understand what's the new thing that's going on, because that's the proxy for me to understand whether they'll be able to deal with ambiguity or not. Ambiguity is about learning at a fast clip.
Yeah.
Something which you didn't know, now you have to learn, now you have to understand the constraint, now you have to know, and then figure out how do you bring everything together, right? So that's how you judge people as well. So this is something which is also an important trait that we do.
Yeah, and I think it has been kind of a constant in your career so far, because you did talk about one of the core motivations to change the industry or a different problem statement was to learn about something new.
Absolutely.
Even within Amazon, when you said you went to Alexa because you wanted to learn about their problem statement.
Yes.
So that kind of also has become something that you test for when you had in your teams.
Absolutely.
Somebody has to be, and I think it's very it makes a lot of sense that if somebody is somebody is interested in learning, then they will find a way out of any ambiguous situation.
Absolutely.
Which particularly in case of FinTech, anytime something happens, a new regulation comes and you are like, okay, now what do I do?
Yeah.
Do I let my product die, or do I figure out a way around it and come out of it and still have the product running for my customers?
Absolutely.
So I could just relate with it.
Yeah.
Anyways, thank you so much, Vijeth.
Thank you, Navneet.
So with that, we come to the end of this episode of Airtribe Podcast. Hope to see you in the next one.